Hello, everybody. My name is Anton Brevde. I'm a partner here at Prime Movers Lab. I'd like to welcome our audience. We have some of our Prime Movers Lab LPs, other investors, founders, and other people that are interested in deep tech. For those of you that are not familiar, Prime Movers Lab is an early stage deep tech fund. We invest in breakthrough scientific inventions that have the ability to impact billions of lives across sectors like energy, infrastructure, manufacturing, transportation, human augmentation, and the future of computing. And today we're going to be having a webinar on portable battery technology. This is the second of 8 webinars that we're going to do in the various areas that we're interested in investing in. And the kind of spirit behind the webinars is our team and our technical partners like Dan spend quite a bit of time learning and educating themselves about these areas and get to interact with some founders and experts. And part of our mission is not just to make investments, but also to share some of that knowledge that we gain. And so that's really what we're here to do today. Today we'll be talking about batteries, as I mentioned, and we have lucky enough to have some really amazing experts and founders here. And so we'll be talking a little bit about some of the top trends and technologies that investors and founders should be aware of in the portable battery space. Besides that, I'll just mention, so this will be an hour long. This will be dynamic, so if people have questions, they're welcome to put them into chat or the Q&A function, and we'll probably weave those in starting kind of in the halfway point or 45-minute point. And I'll put in a reminder if people are feeling shy. And besides that, next week we'll have our next webinar. It'll be on fusion. Same day, same time, same place. We'll send out an invite for that later today. And with that, I'll kick it over to my partner, Dan Slomski.
Hi, everybody. Great to see you. So just by way of quick intro, I studied, hold on, my internet says it's unstable. I studied general physics at Penn State with a focus in experimental and applied physics. And after graduating, I started being called a systems engineer as I began working on real world projects, kind of sitting central in a project team, executing like multidisciplinary systems level thinking. I've worked at a number of startups across many sectors, from mining, lab automation, biotech, material analysis, robotics. And I joined Prime Movers in the earliest days, and this has been a match made in heaven. I've authored our thought pieces on batteries and other forms of energy storage in the past, and so this was a good fit. And I want to extend a warm welcome to our panelists. We'll have each of them introduce themselves briefly, and we'll get rolling on some of the meaty questions. Jim, can you kick us off?
Sure. My name is Jim Kaschmitter. I'm the CEO of SpectraPower in Livermore, California. SpectraPower is a private contract research laboratory and consulting service, primarily in lithium-ion, lithium metal, solid-state batteries. I've started in lithium-ion in 1989 when I was the power engineer for the Star Wars project and was building lithium-ion cells in 1991. I started a company called Polystore in 1993. We manufactured all form factors of lithium ions, starting with cylindricals, prismatics, pouch cells. And then I've started 2 other companies in the space. One was PowerStore, which manufactures carbon aerogel-based supercapacitors. They were bought by Cooper Busman, now Eaton. And then started a fuel cell company called Ultracell, making micro fuel cells, mostly for the military now, and they're manufactured in the US here. So does that cover it?
That's a great one. And we'll have a chance to explore SpectraPower's kind of core offerings as we talk through the questions.
Sure.
Christine, do you want to go next?
Great. Yeah. Hi, my name is Christine Ho, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Imprint Energy. At Imprint, we make trusted, safe, high-performance printed zinc batteries that blend electronics into our lives. And my background's in material science. I'm actually the primary inventor of Imprint's technology, which was developed originally at UC Berkeley. And we spun out the technology in December of 2010. Imprint's a venture-backed startup. We've raised over 50 million in equity, also brought in another 12 million in non-dilutive grants, project revenue, JDAs. We're on track to close a Series B in the middle of Q4 of this year. We're excited about that. And that's meant to really multiply our customer base, scale manufacturing, continue to come down the cost curve. And we're based in Alameda with 15 people full-time and wonderful advisors, including the former CEO of Panasonic North Americas and the former CEO of Applied Materials.
Cool. And then I'll introduce Dr. Richard Wang, CEO of Cuberg.
Yeah, Richard Wang, co-founder and CEO at Cuberg. A little bit about myself first. Born in Taiwan, grew up in Singapore and New York originally. And I went to undergrad at Caltech and then pursued my PhD at Stanford in material science. And that's really where I got very excited about working on battery materials and battery technology. And Cuberg itself spun out of my PhD work at Stanford. So it's my first job out of school, I like to say, but it's been quite a wild ride the past 4 years. Cuberg is commercializing a next-gen battery technology based on lithium metal and some specific electrolyte chemistry innovations that we've come up with. And what this means practically is a battery that stores up to 80% more energy per volume and per weight compared to the best lithium-ion batteries today, and is designed to be fully manufacturable and compatible with the existing manufacturing ecosystem that's been built out by the lithium-ion industry. We are financed, also a combination of VCs and non-dilutive funding. Boeing is our most recent lead investor, so we've leaned heavily on the corporate partnership side of the world, and are very excited right now to be seeing traction and pursuing a lot of interesting markets, especially around electric aviation, electric planes, eVTOL, and so forth.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today. So, yeah, I guess I'd be interested to hear just briefly what drew each of you to this space and kind of what's inspired you to continue working in the battery sector through the ups and downs that the last decade has brought. Hi, we have our partner Daniel joining us.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late.
Hi. I'm happy to kick us off if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
please.
for me at least, Imprint innovations rooted in material science, which was my background, and actually probably a lot of battery innovation is rooted in material science. So I was introduced to this field by my dad, who immigrated to the US and pursued a master's in material science and had a really great career in semiconductor space, and actually eventually became a CEO of his own startup when I was in high school. So I went into Berkeley studying material science. I was just very, very lucky and got a chance to, in my sophomore year, research batteries with one of the graduate research groups. And I've just been hooked. I think batteries are kind of like an elusive muse. They're perpetually inspiring, but also equally frustrating and challenging. There are phenomena that occur in batteries that compete against each other and others that work in harmony. And so those extremes, I think, are what create a lot of the innovation and creativity in this field. And I know many people dedicate their lives to batteries. So, you know, it's been a number of years for me. I'm really motivated to bring safer batteries to everyone and to have better battery alternative. From a personal perspective, when I was at Berkeley, I was literally hand painting zinc batteries one at a time. And it's been really inspiring to be a part of Imprint and see those batteries go from being hand painted to being made on automated roll-to-roll lines, on the order of thousands to millions of units. So just like seeing benchtop, invention turn into something that can be manufacturable and cost-effective and high performance has been, fuel for my tank. So that's why I do this, and that's why I'm still in the field.
Cool, thank you. Jim, Richard, care to share?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to go next. So I was really driven to start pursuing battery technologies when I was looking at options for my PhD, also material science. And it was really around thinking about sort of what are the big societal problems facing us. Really from a sort of for a long time, I've been very curious about the climate change crisis that we face. And that's really been my fundamental motivation. And looking at what is lacking in the energy sector, I couldn't help but notice that many of the energy problems that we have are around the limitations of battery technology and the extent to which battery technologies limit our ability to really move to more efficient forms of transportation and more efficient uses of energy. So it really seemed like the biggest technical problem that was holding us back in tackling climate change. And that's really why I decided to pursue a career in it and try to really do something impactful in that space. And so that's why as well, at Cuberg, we focused on the mobility sector because that's, I think, one area where, the demands on battery technologies are really high and really where a lot of where it's pushing a lot of serious innovation. And so one of the things I find most exciting right now is I think right now is probably one of the most exciting times in history really to be in the battery field, because especially when you look at the transportation sector, it's undergoing this enormous transition. We're talking about completely shifting from multi-$100 billion oil and gas industry to batteries for fueling transportation. And so being in the middle of that and watching it happen is just extremely exciting and inspiring. So I'm definitely happy to continue on this journey and hopefully can contribute to a solution for this.
And thank you for the work you're putting in that direction. Jim, I'm excited to hear kind of how you got your start and how that's unfolded.
A little bit different than the other guys. Well, so I started in from the satellite space, and in a previous life, I used to design supercomputers. And when I got into energy storage, I was shocked at how poor the batteries were at the time. Nickel metal hydride was probably one of the best systems, and it was in the order of 80 watt hours per kg. And so when I started coming across some of the early lithium ion research, I thought this is really the battery of the future. So that's why I went into the field. It has evolved a lot. I think the markets are much different now. The first markets were really for like camcorders and laptop computers, and so it was a limited kind of specialty market, and lithium ion was too expensive for a lot of applications. So it has started, I think really what kicked it off was when Apple started putting batteries in things like iPods and iPhones. They could afford to pay the higher prices for pouch or polymer cells, but that increased the volumes dramatically, and it also allowed electronics to shrink, because it used to be the laptops, the thickness was set by the diameter of the 18650 cylindrical cell, and now, Apple's showing, well, gosh, we can make them thinner, right? Because the batteries are thinner. But this has opened up a lot of markets, and then the advent of EVs is going to completely change the landscape.
Cool. Thank you so much for that. So now the next one, this is going to be a big question. Lithium versus non-lithium battery chemistries moving forward. There's lots of talk about the initiatives in place from government entities and others to specifically get away from lithium, but the lithium market has so much steam, so much momentum that we expect it will have a role to play in the future. And we have an interesting collection of panelists here to help us explore that. So I'm excited to dig in on this. Richard, like representing the lithium future, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think lithium will continue to play an integral part in any battery future that we have. And there's a simple sort of material science reason is lithium is just probably the best element on the periodic table you can find for a highly electronegative material that is also very small and ionic radius. And so what this means is I actually looked at lots of non-lithium chemistries also during my PhD. And the reality is it's so difficult to create an electrode material that allows you to move lithium in and out reversibly if it's any bigger than a lithium ion. Like if you put in a sodium ion, it's so much harder to have a good sodium ion cathode than it is a lithium ion cathode. So I think, for all those sort of fundamental reasons, for sort of main sort of performance driven applications like mobility, I think lithium is here to stay. We don't have a better solution than lithium on the horizon. But I do see a dramatic proliferation of new technologies on the horizon. So certainly like with Imprint, for example, certainly a lot of exciting things going on there. And then also, I know we don't want to talk about grid storage, but certainly in grid storage, there's a much better argument to be made for potential non-lithium chemistries. So I definitely see a proliferation, but at least in the mobility sector, I think lithium will continue to dominate.
Cool. How about a counterpoint, Christine?
Yeah, I think I generally agree. Much like if you look at the history of batteries, for example, lead acids, even though there are known sort of issues from like a safety or performance perspective, it's not like lithium ion has completely displaced that industry. If anything, it's a very well sort of established and thriving industry. Instead, lithium ion has just established completely new market opportunities and created new products. And so I think a similar trend will happen here. There will be a mainstay of markets and opportunities that will continue to benefit from lithium, but there are new markets on the horizon, new applications that simply just can't use lithium batteries. At Imprint, we've really tried to focus our go-to-market strategy on a big juicy market where a non-lithium battery like a zinc system has clear differentiated value. And in some cases, customers literally say, I can't bring any other sort of battery technology to market in my device because it's just not possible to do this with, existing batteries. And so, so that's been kind of like our methodology to find an entryway into early market opportunities. And for us, that is the IoT and the medical space. There are, beyond just performance, there are actually regulatory reasons and safety reasons why more and more customers are pointing to non-lithium chemistries. From a safety perspective, there are lots of issues with battery failures, fires on planes and ships in the logistics space has driven international regulatory bodies like IATA and the UN to essentially put restrictions on lithium shipments and lithium batteries being used in data loggers. So there's a real opportunity to service the logistics industry with smart sensors that are powered with non-lithium batteries. And same goes for the medical industry that want to put more and more digital health sensors on people's bodies or on different sort of medical devices. They don't want to expose patients to any sort of safety risk. And there's really low tolerance for that. So a lot of these medical OEMs have already chosen non-lithium batteries and they're looking for a better solution. So, I think there are these key areas that are going to drive real pull for non-lithium chemistries. And I think more and more opportunities that we can't even fathom will just continue to grow. So there'll be, I think, decades of new business opportunities for non-lithium chemistries like Imprints.
And safety aside, I've been interested in zinc batteries, zinc chemistries. I know that that's one that's getting a lot of attention just because of the plentifulness of zinc in the Earth's crust, and the non-reliance on conflict metals and such as cobalt and other metals that are needed to make lithium really shine. Can you speak to us a little bit more about zinc and what we might look for in the future there?
Yeah, especially focused on the portable space, zinc does have some major advantages, even though, for example, theoretically, lithium may be a higher energy density material. Zinc in itself is also quite energy dense. And then when you really talk about practically packaging batteries, lithium chemistries and some other sort of conventional chemistries need a lot of hermetic packaging because they can be poisoned by moisture in the air. And so as you really start to think about integrated systems, miniaturized batteries, thin, flexible batteries, you start to give away too much of the volume to inactive materials. So even on a performance standpoint, zinc is really well primed to give the highest performance battery to some of these applications, because we just don't have that level of packaging requirement. We can fit more active material in a given volume. You know, where the materials come from and how easy it is to process materials and manufacture materials are also really important too. You know, zinc is a very abundant material, and so are cathode materials. A lot of these materials are already made in huge volume at very high, you know, electrochemical grade quality. So very cost effective from a starting point. But what's great also is that, you know, from a manufacturing standpoint, we don't need dry rooms, we don't need glove boxes. The overhead and the potential risk of any sort of safety issues, even on the manufacturing line or at the end of life, is also eliminated. And those are certain costs and also safety risks that are oftentimes unaccounted for every lithium battery that goes into a recycling facility. There are many, many issues with safety, like fires and whatnot. So, you know, you kind of have to account for everything from cradle to grave. And so zinc in particular really kind of provides a way to look at that total cost of ownership and provide something that is much more cost sensible, but also safer and high performance too.
Cool. Our next question is all about safety. So before we jump there, I want to hear from Jim on what you see as the future in different alternate battery chemistries, and what the kind of industry attitude is towards lithium in different fields.
Sure. Well, you know, lithium, even small lithium ion batteries now commercially are shipping at over 300 watt hours per kilogram. We've tested from several different manufacturers. So the performance is excellent. I think it will continue to improve. You know, lithium ion has improved about 5% per year, gravimetric energy density. I think there are breakthroughs that are coming through that are going to make lithium ion even more important. There's really three things that I see. If you follow some of the more recent literature, one of the breakthroughs is the elimination of cobalt. And that is as you mentioned, there's conflict areas that it's sourced. And it's had price swings, you know, violent price swings depending on usage. So people have been designing it out, but there has been some recent work in the past few months that actually shows it will be eliminated completely. So that impacts price and allows scale. So when you go to electric vehicles, the volumes become huge. And if you had to have cobalt in there, it was a risk item from a cost perspective. So that accomplishes one thing. The other thing I think that's important is fast charge. We're seeing fast charge cells, lithium ion cells that can charge in 5 to 10 minutes. And that'll start to come out, I think, in the next few years, widely commercially. That has a huge impact on electric vehicles. If you can charge your car that fast, you know, in other words, it's like you pull over, have a cup of coffee and check your email and you charge your car. You don't need these real long range cars. You can get away with shorter range because you can recharge quickly. So that will reduce cost and it'll make them much more viable. It also is very important for portable because, you know, if your laptop battery is going dead or your cell phone battery is going dead, you can charge it in minutes. And so I think that's going to have a huge impact. And finally, there are safety technologies being worked on for lithium ion. And I think we'll see safety continue to improve. I've researched this extensively, and a lot of the safety problems originate in metal particles in the cathode and other parts of the cell. But with tight quality control and preventive maintenance and things like that, and newer technologies that will make the cell more impervious to resistive shorts caused by particulates, I think we'll see safety continue to improve. The other thing I want to point out, I guess, lastly, is lithium ion manufacturing technology has been under development for really about 35 years. It took Sony 10 years to develop the lithium ion cell before they commercialized it. And when we manufactured lithium ion, we were the first, probably the only guys in the US. It was surprising how difficult it is to manufacture. So there's a huge infrastructure in manufacturing batteries, and lithium ion is, I think, highly developed in that regard. There's now wide source capability of equipment at reasonable cost. The manufacturing processes have been refined highly. Yields are very high, you know, in the mid 90, upper 90 percentile range, which is excellent for a product like that. So I think if you take that with all of the performance characteristics of lithium ion, I think it has a bright future.
Cool. And that's a great segue to our next on kind of safety. You know, battery fires and explosions, they make news headlines. But I'm always wondering if it's really as big of a problem as they would have us believe, or if it is, you know, sensational headline grabbing. Would you say that safety is one of the most critical design parameters affecting battery research today, and what innovations are most likely to solve that? Jim, you were kind of mentioning some of the battery safety.
So what the problem in a lithium ion cell when you have a particulate short is that it can precipitate from metal particles out of the electrodes. That process can take a few months, or it can just be a particulate that was introduced in production inadvertently, or things like a slitting failure causing a burr. And typically what happens is that a resistive short heats the separator, and polyolefin separators melt. Polyethylene is most widely used. They start to melt at about 135 C, which is quite low actually. But the problem is they shrink very quickly. And so when that separator melts due to a particulate, it quickly turns into a dead short, and then you have an explosion. So there are separator technologies that are out, but there are new ones coming out that I think will help address that. One of the most common ones that's enabled really thin separators down to like 6-7 microns is that ceramic coating that's put on the separator. This helps prevent shrinkage, and it also provides the ceramic won't melt, so even if there is an incident, it helps prevent it from getting worse.
And just for the benefit of our audience, a thinner separator would allow for essentially a thinner battery layer.
Yeah, it's used in
meaning you can.
It's an easy way to get volumetric gravimetric energy density increases because you're getting rid of an inactive material in the cell. So it's gone from what traditionally was about 25 microns to where today in portable electronics it's running about 5 to 10 microns, and then usually there's a micron or two of ceramic coating on top of that, or very often I should say.
So I'd love to turn this one over to each of you has experience improving the safety of batteries. So this is a great question for us. I think I'll go to Richard next. We've learned an immense amount about Cuberg over the months, and this is a company that we've been very excited about. Would you like to tell us what you guys are doing to your thoughts on safety and what we might see in the future?
Yeah. So on the safety question, it is sensationalized somewhat by the media. There isn't sort of this conspiracy where all of our batteries are going to start exploding in a few years, right? Like, people have thought about this, engineers have thought about this. Cars are designed to be safe even if you do have cells undergo thermal runaway. And so very much the industry is moving into a direction that assumes that inherently, at some statistical probability, you can still have a cell go into runaway, but your pack design will ultimately accommodate for that. But that requires that a certain level of safety is still maintained. You can't literally just have your cell explode, right? You can't contain that no matter what you do as an engineer. So lithium ion has found some sort of stabilized state. That's a compromise of performance and safety and various other considerations. I think the big question comes about as people are trying to now dramatically further increase energy density and just pack much more energy into a given space. And as you have more energetic materials that are less stable, more chemically reactive, the entire safety problem becomes more complex and more difficult. And that's really, I think, where it does start becoming a big design constraint, because you really need to engineer your whole cell chemistry with safety in mind to maintain or beat lithium ion levels of safety to be practically commercializable. And so what that means is you end up needing significant buffers of stability in all the different elements of your cell that can go wrong. So Jim mentioned, separators. That's one of the already commercial efforts that really buys you an extra buffer of thermal stability in your cell. Cuberg itself, we're looking at electrolytes as another critical component, given, current electrolytes are highly volatile and flammable. And so we are really focused on non-flammable electrolytes that don't produce vapors. And this helps to significantly mitigate another potential source of runaway reactions. You still have the cathode, which gives off a lot of oxygen. The cathode is ultimately, for lithium ion batteries, why safety is such a complex process, because as you have a cell that overheats, the oxygen gets released from your cathode, and then you have a self-sustaining combustion source when combined with the rest of your cell. And so, thinking very precisely about what are all the different components and cell designs you can do to stop that runaway reaction before it really gets going is how we continue improving safety, especially when we try to pack in more and more energy dense materials into there.
Okay, and Christine, what approach are you taking, and how do you see the field unfolding?
Yeah, well, I want to address your point about battery failures and fires, and whether that's sensational. We've found citations that in terms of actual battery failures and catastrophic failures happening, that's happening on the order of 100 ppm. So for every million batteries that are deployed, there are 100 or so at least reported failures. So if you think about that, that actually, from a manufacturer's point of view, that seems pretty good, but there are 3.5 billion smartphones that are deployed. There are more than 500 million laptops, another 500 million tablets that are deployed. And now with electric vehicles, where a car could have, on the order of like 500, individual cells, the likelihood now of potential failure is huge. For every billion, that's 100,000 incidents. And electric vehicles is one sort of market that will drive the number of batteries, just the total volume of batteries, to huge quantities. So will, for example, IoT. They're talking about trillions of devices. If every package, for example, has a smart sensor that's battery powered, DHL alone ships 5 billion packages a year. So you think about how many potential safety risks and incidents could happen, and it really explodes. A lot of the tier 1 manufacturers indeed have made a lot of investments to put good sort of quality control and manufacturing processes in place to help mitigate safety issues and also ensure good quality manufacturing. But there are more and more non-top tier battery manufacturers that are coming into play and supplying batteries to the broader field. So that potential risk of potential failure for lithium ion just really will skyrocket. So I think that in certain applications where volume is key, that type of failure statistic is just not acceptable. And especially, for example, in the field that we're focused in, the IoT in the medical space, that's a failure rate that is just not accepted by the OEMs. And so that's where, they are looking for alternatives. They're looking for safer systems. And just maybe one other story, about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, we had like a discovery discussion with a cell phone tier 1 manufacturer. They were interested in Imprint's technology, and they drew a spider diagram of lithium batteries, each of the sort of arms being a feature like energy density, safety, cycle life. And they basically said that just because of the market dynamics, even if they were sacrificing 20 to 30% safety margin, they would do that if they got them 10% increase in energy density. So I think some of the motivations within the industry has kind of driven these technologies to an extreme from a safety perspective. I'm sure there will be investments to make things better, but there are definitely, you know, certain markets and certain industries just that can't tolerate that level of failure. So, you know, at Imprint, we're looking to give a safer alternative where lithium ion just really isn't a solution.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing this, safety is an issue to be, you know, considered in almost all of the areas of battery research, and you know, there's somewhere that I don't know if it's the most important thing that's being studied, but it definitely seems to be a consideration for everyone working in this field. You don't want to be the next headlines, and it seems like some of the government regulations and other kind of mandates on using non-lithium chemistries are kind of safety focused. Thank you for those interesting perspectives.
Maybe switching.
I just want to provide one brief follow-up. The one thing I was going to comment is I don't think that 100 ppm number is anywhere near practically what people are seeing in the industry these days. Because like you have 10,000 cells in every Tesla. Like that would mean every single Tesla in its lifetime has a cell blowing up, which is just statistically not true, right? The catastrophic failure rate is much lower for lithium ion cells these days. And the other point is when you shrink down to a micro battery where the surface area is very small, even a lithium-based battery becomes much safer because there isn't enough energy to pump through that short to actually cause it to go into runaway. So those were the two kind of, you know, it's a little more finessed, I think, in terms of thinking about lithium safety.
That's a good distinction. Thank you, Richard. Maybe looking at it from an investing perspective, portable batteries have had a bit of a checkered history with investments previously. I think it'd be great to get everyone's perspective on why now is a good time for investors to be looking at the space, maybe some recent success stories that you know, give us hope that we were reaching kind of an inflection point in the industry. Maybe Richard, since you were just talking, maybe you could start us off here.
Yeah, sure. This is we were looking at your list of questions. This is probably one of the most difficult questions in this industry, unfortunately, because there have been many failures, as you guys all know, historically. One of the most fundamental challenges in this industry is, again, you know, going on Jim's point, it's all about manufacturability and scale at the end of the day. If you have an innovation, especially one that's meant to compete at very, very large volume with lithium ion, and it's not fully compatible with that, you know, 30, 40 years of lithium ion manufacturing expertise, that technology is not going to compete. You know, a company, the cell manufacturers that are investing hundreds of billions of dollars in capital equipment over the next 10 years are not going to retool those factories to accommodate for a new technology, you know, even if it's somewhat better in some respects. So that's really where, you know, a lot of things have gone off the rails historically, is picking technologies that look good in the lab but don't really scale at the end of the day. So I think in terms of looking at battery investments, that's really kind of the first principle that you would look at, is can this scale, and has it already been scaled to some extent to prove that it is compatible with the manufacturing ecosystem. You know, in terms of sort of specific successes, you know, that you asked about, it's a difficult question because the industry honestly is, you know, we're all part of this industry, and I think we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of also unsavory players in this industry making a lot of claims, and some even that are financially successful, but honestly that are not really doing the real work in commercializing technologies that work properly. So one financial success you could call it would be QuantumScape, hypothetically. QuantumScape, as many of you have seen, you know, Volkswagen is one of their big investors. They're going public through a SPAC right now for I think like a three point something billion valuation. So certainly, you know, I think would be considered an investor win, but in many other respects, you know, I find it very hard to respect, you know, what that company has achieved so far and how they're going about what they're doing. I will kind of leave it at that, but that's kind of the sort of the unsavory part of the battery industry. Batteries are so complex that anyone who's not a true expert can often be misled into seeing what is a real breakthrough, what is not a real breakthrough, what will ultimately make it and what won't. So you know, there's that. There are other companies that are maybe more respectable. Sila Nanotechnologies, I think they've been valued also at more than $1 billion, a battery unicorn. and they are doing, sort of proper, solid scientific work. Again, very difficult scalability challenges, but at least that's a company you can respect where they are generating real venture level returns, showing that it is possible. And a lot of the valuations have ultimately been driven by the electric vehicle industry. Tesla, everyone following Tesla, just the growth of the EV industry, that's really driven tremendous value creation potential out of new battery technologies.
Great. Christine, do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Richard on that front. I think, there are some quiet successes that maybe not pointed to very often, but would be considered commercialization successes. A lot of for example, the medical space, Great Batch, Medtronic, they make their own batteries and they have made small acquisitions, very quiet acquisitions of companies to sort of bolster their own capabilities. There's also, SAF being acquired by Total, that was like a $1.1 billion acquisition, A123 back in the day. And then I think, because some of these large companies have their own internal developments, there are also at least successes you can point to from a commercialization standpoint of batteries being brought to market for a very purpose-driven product. And with that kind of focus in mind, it is possible to bring, new technology to market very rapidly. So, the most classic example back in the day was Polaroid bringing the first ever zinc thin battery into, the film packs to add a little bit of pulse to a flash. So, so there's examples out here and there, but also, potentially a number of bodies in the ground. And I think it leaves us all with our eyes wide open, with respect to how we want to grow our businesses and grow towards, success.
So what I'm a little curious about is, there's different ways that someone can be in the battery field, and making batteries is really only one approach, and it might be the highest margin or something like that. But here at Prime Movers, like, we look at a lot of different battery technology companies, sometimes making just a single component, but also looking at companies that are offering totally ancillary services such as testing and analysis. Maybe trying to get that failure rate down by doing ultrasonic analysis on the battery packs before they ever even go to testing, to where they catch fire or don't. Do you have any thoughts on kind of where the biggest gains are being made, or like if someone's looking to invest in this space, is it the battery makers, is it the component suppliers, or is it some of these service or equipment manufacturers that are kind of having the best successes? Do you have some thoughts on that, Jim?
Sure. Well, first of all, actually, cell making is probably the lowest margin, and it's also the most competitive. I think 2 years ago, cell manufacturers had zero margins, and it requires a huge amount of money. We used to joke that 100 million was sort of the entry fee, and it went up from there. But there are opportunities, I think, in this space, as you mentioned, some things about servicing, maybe cells. There may be a recycling industry that goes up around this. I think materials are an area where people can make money. If you can have an improved material, it doesn't require such a huge investment. And traditionally, the materials manufacturers have had better margins than the cell manufacturers. And especially if you can bring an improvement that just folds right into a production line, as Richard was pointing to, then I think those are the best opportunity spaces.
Cool. Christine, Richard, do you have any thoughts on this quickly?
I would just add machine learning is another area I'm very excited about personally. Just applying a level of intelligence on all the various aspects, from manufacturing to cycle life prediction to R&D to sort of ultimately reliability in the field. I think it's starting to become academically quite exciting, but tremendous industrial opportunities still there. So we're following this closely and also pursuing this.
That sounds great. Let me see. What new battery-hungry markets might we see unlocking in the next 3 to 5 years by advances in battery materials, and kind of what's holding them back today? Richard, I think you will have an interesting perspective here.
I mean, yeah, we're very excited about the electric aviation market, as you know, and that really is this example of the, sort of, as Christine was mentioning, an entirely new industry, right? That gets enabled when you've invented a new technology that hasn't existed before. And in this case, it's ultra lightweight batteries that start to get aviation to a point where there is a real business case to be made for significant portions of the aviation industry. We're not saying that batteries are one day going to power, sort of your 777 flying across the Pacific. Like, I don't think anyone is realistically saying that. It's just, batteries don't have that headroom energy density wise, but there are substantial markets where it makes sense in terms of short haul flights under 500 miles, which is a significant proportion of emissions in aviation, and then also entirely new use cases of aviation that wouldn't be possible without an electric powertrain. This would be things like urban air mobility, where you can't use helicopters in cities because it's too noisy. And you can't have distributed motors reliably without electrification that are quiet and high efficiency. So you need electrification to enable urban air mobility. And that's why now with batteries improving, that's become such an exciting field. The other exciting field we're watching is just sort of small, kind of almost Cessna type electric planes. This is the lowest risk form of electric aviation in terms of very easy certification process to get there. And also a great business case to be made, because maintenance is such a large portion of driving costs, operational costs for small planes especially. It's a huge overhead. And when you can get down the overhead, when you can get down the fuel costs, you start opening up a lot of new opportunities where previously people who could only, you have to be quite wealthy to be able to fly these short legs with small planes. And now that's really democratizing what air travel can do and making that a lot more affordable for a lot more people. So a much better ability to move around in the air. That's one thing we're really excited about.
Cool. Christine, you have some thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously am really excited for the IoT space, in particular, logistics and medical applications. As I mentioned before, there's tens of billions of things that are shipped all over the world. For example, pharma, vaccines, drugs, over 50% of those drugs or vaccines are damaged or rendered not useful in the supply chain due to maybe a temperature exposure or actual impact and damage, and also tampering. Nearly $500 billion worth of loss in the supply chain just due to tampering and counterfeiting. And so even like, for example, with COVID coming and the need to disseminate vaccines globally, that's going to be 15 million deliveries alone just for the COVID vaccines, and many sort of flights with vaccines that are very temperature sensitive. So we think these are really exciting markets that will drive sort of new innovation on the battery side. Same with medical. I think more and more sort of applications that can benefit from having better quality information about our bodies and our health, whether it's continuous glucose monitors, which are on the market today, temperature monitors that hospitals can use, other sort of health metrics. So I think we're going to see more of that, and as a result, a lot of battery powered stuff just in our lives.
Cool. Thank you very much. My internet was choking there for a moment. I think it's time to switch over to some Q&A questions. With regards to battery safety, what are your thoughts on FAA approving batteries for air travel and kind of some of the regulations and restrictions that have been in place around that and how they might be evolving in the coming next few years? I'll let anybody that wants to jump in there.
I'm happy to take that. We've looked quite a bit at FAA and airworthiness. It's definitely an evolving situation. The FAA has not fully made up its mind about what are the tests that a battery would have to pass before it can go into a manned system, especially an entirely new type of aircraft. There are some basic sort of common sense standards, which is, if you drive one cell or even several cells simultaneously into kind of worst possible case thermal runaway, your pack has to still be able to operate normally and still be able to fly normally and do an emergency landing. That's like a basic requirement that everyone is expecting. And so that's one that everyone is working towards, but the details of certification are not yet certain. You know, as I mentioned, you know, the regulatory bodies are looking to have a much lighter touch on systems where it's already an existing plane that's already certified and you're just swapping in a propulsion system. And there are already companies successfully doing this in Europe and in the US. This would be kind of the 2-seater, 4-seater kind of small prop planes. And so those are ones where the regulatory pathway is much clearer and easier. And on the other end, you know, where I would say, you know, entirely new novel aircraft concepts plus autonomy plus everything else that people are wanting to do, like an Uber Elevate, that's a lot further away from a regulatory perspective. So there's spectrums of complexities there.
Yeah, and I can add to that with respect to whether or not people can bring batteries, you know, onto a plane or in the cargo hold of a plane. The regulatory body that at least signals, you know, guidance around that is IATA, the International Air Transport Association, and they have a dangerous goods sort of regulation on lithium batteries in particular. And over the last couple of years, they have advanced their guidance to be even stricter. I think you've already probably experienced it if you were doing a lot of air travel. You know, there's certain limitations to sizes of batteries that could come on with the passenger, and also in the cargo hold, there are restrictions to how many lithium batteries can be near each other if they're of a certain energy density. So those restrictions continue to escalate, especially because there are real incidents. You know, in July, there was a major incident with Ethiopian Air out in Shanghai having a fire in the cargo hold. So so those are some of the regulatory bodies to look for, and their guidance continues to update on a yearly basis.
Well, and Christina, I think you may have a unique perspective on this. You kind of mentioned how some applications simply cannot use lithium. It's not possible. It's not that it's not actually possible, it's that they're mandated that they must not do so, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, if there's a limitation to how many lithium battery data loggers can be near each other in the cargo hold of a plane, then that would eliminate how many vaccines can actually have, you know, battery powered sensors shipped on the plane. And so it makes it much more expensive. So in that token, you know, OEMs are looking to use a non-lithium battery so they can pack as many vaccines in that cargo hold and make it more cost effective to ship, you know, vaccines. So that's kind of one example where a non-lithium battery makes a lot more sense from a business perspective.
Yeah, and even, you know, I think you were telling me earlier about cases where you might use a battery in contact with the skin or in very close proximity to the body. Even beyond FAA regulations, there are a broader set of regulations on must not use lithium.
Yeah, you know, for example, like in the hospitals, if anything were to touch a patient's skin, it becomes biohazardous waste, needs to be incinerated. So if, you know, a battery powered device also is in contact with the patient, that also has to be incinerated. So they're looking for batteries that can follow that sort of end disposal stream. And so again, something that doesn't have that sort of safety risk under incineration becomes a critical choice for them.
Cool. Let's jump over to another question. Anton, you want to run with one?
Sure. We're getting quite a few questions coming in, so maybe we'll do a little rapid fire. Whoever, you know, wants to answer, jump in, and we'll just do kind of one answer per question. What about which countries are leading the charge on battery advancements? Are there concerns with certain players in the industry?
Well, I think I probably answered that. The leading players right now are really Korea and China. Japan has, which, you know, really led the development, is, I would say, somewhat fallen behind. LG is now the world's largest battery manufacturer, for instance. And if you look at the Chinese capacity, it's huge and growing rapidly.
Got it. Awesome. Maybe switching to the EV auto side of things, what is your view on EV auto and trucking industry evolution, both the market share and size versus the internal combustion engine over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and any insight into scalable breakthroughs that would change those market dynamics? bit of a juicy one for a rapid fire, but who wants to give it a shot?
That's a really big question. But
Take any part of it that you'd like.
well, what I've read is that at least, by 2030, people are expecting the battery industry just for automotive to be well into the several $100 billion, like, $300–400 billion range. And really there's going to be a scarcity of batteries for the foreseeable future because the growth trends in automotive are fantastic, and we're only at the very, very beginning of those growth trends. So it's going to be a race of, whoever can build decent batteries at cost, there will always be a customer for at least the next decade for lithium-ion cells. Longer term, things like silicon anodes, lithium metal anodes, solid state are all hypothetical innovations coming down the pipeline that may drive further cost reductions and performance increases. But at least kind of next 5+ years, lithium-ion is going to just really expand at an incredible rate.
Yeah, I'd add something to that, Richard, which is we're seeing also regulatory stuff where countries are going to be mandating a switch over to batteries. And people talk about dates like 2040, 2050, and I think we'll see more and more of that.
Awesome, thank you. What about, maybe this one for you, Jim, explain the key benefits, differences in the different types of lithium cell types, cylindrical, prismatic, pouch, etc.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Cylindrical was the original form factor. It has the advantage of being rapidly, you can produce at high rates. You can wind at like 30 parts per minute, which is one of the slow processes. Disadvantages, so that produces low cost, and traditionally it was a low cost system. Also, in formation, you don't have to do any special processing. It does have a disadvantage in that from a safety perspective, it's more challenging because you basically are in a steel can pressure vessel. The other two form factors, prismatics are basically either a flat wound jelly roll or a stacked cell. Stacking is slow, but gives you sometimes better performance. And finally, a pouch cell is either a flat wound or a stacked cell in a pouch that is sealed hermetically.
Jim, is there any of these that as an investor we might watch for as kind of being the the form factor of the future?
Well, the pouch is really, I would say, heavily won in portable electronics. It's interesting, in China, they go to very large prismatics, and I think it's like almost a mandate because the prismatic cells go up to about 120 amp hours, which are very large. And they use those in electric buses and things like that. It's not necessarily the easiest or cheapest form factor, but it packs very well and is easy to make into battery packs for vehicles. So did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe we'll do one more here. This might be a big one, but how accurate are the battery management system units that are kind of being incorporated into the packs? Is there innovation happening there, and is to what degree are they contributing to safety even more so than the cell safety, cell construction?
Well, I can probably answer that. It's a fairly mature field, and it helps safety in terms of you prevent overcharge, you maintain cell balance, you prevent undercharge, traditional things. Then it usually also incorporates some kind of Coulomb counting for gas gauging. There are many chipsets out there that will do that, and they also have thermocouple inputs and things like that. But I don't know of any dramatic breakthroughs, I guess I should say, I'm not aware of, that would change that situation. So it's a good, stable, mature technology, I would say.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I can add that there might be companies like Qnovo that have deployed BMS on the chip level systems that have done a pretty good job of helping to keep lithium ion systems safer and kind of monitoring their health, through use.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at time here. Big thank you so much to Christine, Jim, and Richard, and Dan for moderating, and everyone for watching. This is an area that we're certainly really excited about and be watching closely. And as a reminder, we'll be doing our next webinar next Wednesday on nuclear fusion. So thank you everyone so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.